All that afternoon, Joachim kept on thinking about Caspar, the Black King who had been waiting in Denmark for Elizabeth, the angel Ethereal, and Joshua and the shepherd. How did he know they were coming? Did Ethereal and the King of Nubia have an agreement to meet precisely there in the year 1699? There was nothing to show that their meeting was accidental after all. Then he's one of us, the angel had said as soon as he saw Caspar. All of a sudden Joachim thought of the bookseller. He had said that the Advent calendar looked homemade, and Joachim agreed. It looked as if it had been cut out and glued at home in the kitchen. If John had made the magic Advent calendar, he would have been certain to call the girl in the story after Elizabeth in the picture. But why had he done it? Why had he made the calendar in order to leave it in a bookshop without knowing what would become of it afterwards? In the evening, when Joachim was going to bed, he tried to push all the open doors shut again so that he could look at the large picture properly. Then it happened again, and this time with one of the three wise men who were kneeling behind the baby Jesus in the manger. His skin was dark, just like Caspar, the Black King, and Joachim hadn't noticed it before. Why hadn't he discovered that? Again he was feeling that the picture became clearer and clearer with every day that passed. Before he put out the light, he glanced at it one more time, and the thought it must be strange to be in Bethlehem exactly at the time that Jesus was born. Elizabeth was on her way there, and in a way he was going along on the journey himself. When he woke up the next morning, he opened the 7th door and saw a picture of a sheep eating grass in front of some high walls. He picked up a scrap of paper that was folded over and over and read what was written on it. The angel Ethereal and the Black King Caspar had rode Elizabeth, Joshua, and the 3 sheep over the Great Belt. "We're going ashore again," said Ethereal. "This island is called Finn, and it's exactly 1599 years since Jesus was born in Bethlehem." From the sea they ran towards a large castle on a mound between ramparts and ditches. "That's Nyborg Castle," the angel told them. "We're standing in front of the oldest royal fortress in Scandinavia." Elizabeth pointed up at one of the ramparts. "There's a sheep." The angel nodded. "Then it's one of us." With that, they all leapt up onto the ramparts, the 3 sheep first, Joshua and Caspar after them, Elizabeth and Ethereal last. A soldier rushed out from between the buildings in the castle. He raised a spear and shouted, "Sheep thieves!" The next moment 3 or 4 soldiers came storming up. All of them had spears, and one of them had a kind of gun as well. The angel Ethereal confronted the soldiers, and they threw themselves on the ground and hid their heads in their hands. "Fear not," said the angel in a gentle voice. "I bring you tidings of great joy. The sheep will come to us to the Holy Land, where the Christ child is to be born." Only one of the soldiers dared to look up. He was the one who had called them sheep thieves. "Be merciful unto us and take the sheep with you," he cried. The sheep in question had already joined the others as if it belonged to the little flock. Joshua struck his crook against the rampart and said, "To Bethlehem! To Bethlehem!" Off they went across the green island, the 4 sheep first, Joshua, Caspar, Ethereal, and Elizabeth following them. On the bank of a small river, they passed a town with narrow streets and 1-story dwellings. On the outskirts stood an ancient stone church with a square tower. "That's Odense Cathedral," said Ethereal. "It's called after Canute the Holy, who was killed here in the year 1086. "What's the time by the angel watch?" said Elizabeth. "It's 1537 years after Christ. From now on, the Bible will be printed in all the languages of the world, so that everyone can read about Jesus. For in these days, the art of printing will be invented. Before this, books have had to be written by hand, and only the priests were able to read the Bible. But not many people have learned to read. Now it will be decided that everyone must go to school. Some years ago, said Caspar, a Polish astronomer called Copernicus discovered that the Earth is round as a ball and moves in orbit around the sun. This wasn't news to wise men, but to most people it was new and exciting. Sailors could now travel round the world, and that's how Columbus reached America in the year 1492. After him, the Spanish sailors cruelly attacked the Indians. In the opinion of the kings of the Orient, it would have been better if they had kept to the ships of the desert, for there is no more peaceful animal than a camel in the desert, and peace is the message of Christmas. Elizabeth was still trying to understand what the wise man had said when Joshua had struck the ground with his crook. "To Bethlehem! To Bethlehem!" They went on their way along a ridge that gave them a good view over Finn. Now and then they looked down on a horse drawing a plough or an ox harnessed to a cart. "It's not so flat here," said Elizabeth as she ran. "But we're still in Denmark, aren't we?" The angel nodded. "Yes, indeed, and the Danes are very proud of ridges like this. But we're only 100 metres above sea level. They have called the hillsides we can see down there on the left the Finn Alps. Another ridge is called the Heavenly Mountain. In heaven, we've always considered this to be a slight exaggeration." The procession had paused, and Caspar joined in the conversation once again. "But it's important to be happy about the little you have. However little it is, it's infinitely more than nothing." "If the world was as round and smooth as a ball," said Elizabeth thoughtfully, "then there wouldn't be one single mountain on the whole earth. But then even a rocky slope would be as exciting as the highest mountain in Norway, as long as it was the only rocky slope." "So you see how easily clever ideas travel," said the wise man. "You've been with a wise man for only a fairly short time, but you've understood already a tiny part of heavenly wisdom. Bravo!" Elizabeth was glad that she had said something clever for once. She felt so cheered by it that she tried again. And if the world was as small as the moon, nobody would have complained that it hadn't been made a bit larger. "How true that is," said Caspar. "Even if the world had been no larger than a pea, it would have been as big as a mystery. For where would that little pea have come from? That too would have had to be created by God. It's no easier to create a pea than to create the whole of the solar system." Elizabeth thought that that was a bit of an exaggeration, for if the world hadn't been any larger than a pea, it wouldn't have had room even for Adam and Eve. "If there had only been one star in the sky," Caspar continued, "that one star would have aroused as much wonder as all the other stars together. After all, nobody goes round complaining because there's only one moon. On the contrary, if there had been 100 moons, they would only have got in each other's way. So the creation of billions of stars in the sky was an excessive exaggeration. Whenever there's too much of anything, you can stare at it without appreciating it. That's how it's possible to be out under a starry sky and fail to see a single star because of a shower of shooting stars." It was quite true, thought Elizabeth. She had often looked at a sky full of stars without finding any particular one. Caspar went on. "In the opinion of the kings of the Orient, God spoiled humans a bit, because he created far too much at the same time. He created so many strange things to look at that many people don't see God. But that's how he managed to hide himself too. He wouldn't have been able to do that if only 4 people, 3 trees, 2 sheep and 8 camels existed in the whole of creation. If only one fish could be found in the sea, people would probably have noticed how perfect it was, and then they might have started asking who had made it." For a while he remained standing, looking about him. Elizabeth thought he was waiting for someone to applaud his wise words, so she clapped her hands together. Then the others began clapping as well. There, said Caspar. That wasn't so much to clap for. Then he seemed to change his mind, although it was infinitely more than nothing. The procession of pilgrims ran down towards a little town beside a narrow strip of water. This sound is called Little Belt, said Ethereal. The time is 1504 years after Christ. Before Elizabeth was able to ask how they were going to cross the sound, Joshua was on his way towards a boat that lay moored to a little quay. In the boat sat a young man drawing up a fishing line. When he caught sight of the angel Ethereal, he dropped the line into the sea and threw himself down with his head on the deck. Be not afraid, said Ethereal. We are pilgrims on our way to the Holy Land, where Jesus is to be born. Can you row us over the little belt? Amen, replied the ferryman. Amen, amen. The angel knew his answer meant yes. The 4 sheep and the rest of the pilgrims climbed on board the boat. When the ferryman had rowed across the sound, he stared and stared at Ethereal. It was probably the first time he had seen a proper angel. He didn't even glance at the Black King Caspar. If the angel had not been with them, Elizabeth thought, the ferryman would most certainly have had one more or more than enough to do staring at the Black King. Only if the king had not been with them either would he perhaps have looked at her. She thought it was a shame that the world should be like that. When they went over on the other side and the sheep began jumping out of the boat, they said thank you and goodbye to the ferryman. As for the ferryman, he only repeated what he had already said over and over again. Amen. Amen. Joachim had just finished reading what was on the paper when his mother came into the room. He screwed up the paper quickly, but Mama saw he was hiding something. What are you holding in your hand? Nothing, he said, only air. May I see it then? But Joachim held the ball of paper so hard that his knuckles were quite white. It's a Christmas present, he said. The words Christmas present might have been magic. At any rate, they made Mama smile broadly. For me? Joachim nodded. Then I won't look, said Mama, but it must be a very tiny Christmas present. It's infinitely bigger than nothing, Joachim said. So Mama went to the bathroom. Joachim thought it was strange that everything that had to do with Christmas was so special. It was one of the most secret things in the whole world. But Mama was mistaken about one thing. What he was holding in his hand wasn't a tiny Christmas present.